Hey guys, welcome to your Apple Update. I'm your host, John Sherrod, and today we got to talk about the Mac Pro. And of course, one of the big questions that everyone has is it too expensive? Because after all, the Mac Pro now starts at $6,000, and the Apple Pro Display starts at $5,000 and can be configured up to $7,000, kind of depending on the options you go with on that. And so we are definitely talking about expensive equipment. The question is it too expensive? And whenever you think about is something too expensive or the right amount of price, you gotta have to have some context around it. So, if I held up a Coke can and I said this Coke can cost $5,000, well, obviously we're all gonna go, yeah, that's too expensive. On the other hand, if I drove up to your house in a brand new, fully equipped Honda Accord and said you can have this for $5,000, well, you may not have $5,000 ready to spend on that, but that's still a great deal on a car like that. So you do have to have some context, and we typically understand the value of something based on how we understand about its place in the market. We know that Coke cans cost, 50 cents because of just the economics of what it costs to produce them and mass produce them. And we know that cars cost a lot of money, again, because of the economics involved in creating them and the amount of extra labor and specialization of technology and things like that. It's a lot more expensive to create a Honda Accord than it is to create a can of Coca-Cola. So when we look at the Mac Pro with these prices starting at $6,000, and folks, they're likely going to range up into the tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how you spec one of these things out. And honestly, that $6,000 entry level one is probably not going to be bought by many people, as many people of the people who are buying Mac Pro users, that is. They're probably going to be specing it out, a lot higher than that. And so the context you got to put it in is who is the market for this? And that is changing a little bit because, before a Mac Pro cost $2,500, $3,000 at the low end. And of course, you could spec it up into the tens of thousands of dollars depending on video cards and the amount of RAM and hard drive size and processors you chose and all the various things like that that go into the decision based on what you're using it for. But they did start at a lower end, and so they were a little bit more approachable. What we're looking at here with the new Mac Pro is that rather than casting a wider net of possible customers, Apple is really zeroing in on the highest of high-end Pro users. So we're looking at the kind of people who are in, the highest end, video production houses and movie studio companies and things like that. And this is not unprecedented. I mean, the cost seems weird to someone who doesn't travel in those circles and, would never imagine spending that much money on a computer because most of us don't need that kind of horsepower for the kind of work that we're doing, whether for our personal life or for business life. Most of us, a MacBook Pro is going to be more than sufficient for the needs that we're doing. But there are a select few customers out there who want to have the most horsepower you can possibly put in a computer workstation of that size because of the type of the work that they're doing. And if you think about it, we see all the time, you see somebody driving down the road in a company truck that their company spent, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000 for them to have because they need it for their work. And it's kind of the same thing here. Sometimes, depending on the type of jobs that you do, your company is going to be able to spend a lot of money to provide you with the tools that you need to do the job the most effectively. And so, people who really put a high value on, getting these video renders done as quick as possible, and have the money to spend on it, are now going to have a Mac product that they can sink into and be able to expand and upgrade for years. So the price is definitely expensive, but it's not expensive in the context of that market. Somebody actually on Twitter spec'd out, I think it was a Dell or an HP workstation, a similar type, very high-end workstation in the Windows side, and they spec'd it up all the way to $162,000. So again, that makes most of the back of our heads explode when we think of a computer costing that much. But there are some very specialized types of workflows and type of work environments in which that actually makes a lot of sense. So this is definitely not a computer that people are going to buy for their home use unless they are just a really high-end freelancer or something like that. Most of us aren't going to have it in that kind of situation. And that is a little sad because the Mac Pro definitely was a product that started at lower market. And so while most people weren't buying them for their homes, some people were and some could. And you see them, of course, in smaller companies and smaller shops and also in colleges and universities. And I think you're going to see it less and less on that because now the market they're choosing to target with the new Mac Pro is that super high-end customer who may well spend $50,000 on one of these because that's the type of computer they need for the type of work that they're doing. So, and it's funny too because there's definitely a segment of Mac users who have been kind of clamoring for Apple for years, even going back before the recent Mac Pro debacle. And when I say recent, I'm talking about going back to the trash can Mac Pro from 2013. But there has been a segment of Mac customers who wanted Apple to kind of come out with a smaller mid-range tower, something that sits in between a Mac Mini and a Mac Pro, where you could still open up the case and install your own PCI cards in it, put in the RAM that you want to put in, maybe upgrade the processor down the line, that kind of thing. And Apple has never really made a product like that. The old Mac Pro was kind of step in between that and where the new Mac Pro is. And so, really what Apple's looking to do is they're saying, well, look at our full range of Mac products. You've got the MacBook Pro, and you can connect an eGPU up to it, and that's going to be great for a lot of customers, especially mobile customers. You've got the iMac Pro, which starts at $5,000, and of course it can range on up there, but it also comes with an integrated 5K display, and so it's kind of definitely a stepping stone between, a high-end Retina iMac 27-inch and the Mac Pro. Apple has the Mac Mini, which, depending on the type of work that you're doing, can be spec'd out pretty high, but is still way less expensive than a Mac Pro. That can be used for some pretty impressive tasks. Again, potentially also paired up with an external GPU, like with the MacBook Pro. So Apple does have a range of product solutions available for a range of Pro customers. Now, there are still going to be customers who were looking for a modular Mac where they could put their own cards in and that sort of thing, who just don't have the funds to spend on what the Mac Pro is and what it represents in the market segment, who are now going to look very heavily at switching to PC, and some of them already have. And so I would certainly love to have Apple come in with a tower like the Mac Pro in terms of it being modular and expandable and user upgradable, but that slides in at a lower price point for those customers in smaller shops and individuals in their homes, home studios. That's a big thing here in Nashville where I live. It would definitely be nice to see that. Now, on the display, again, most of us can't even imagine spending anywhere near that much on a television set for our homes, much less a computer monitor. But Apple on stage really said, hey, look, most of us aren't thinking about monitors that cost this much money, but there are high-end reference monitors that are used in, again, high-end production houses, Hollywood studios, that sort of thing, that range up into the $40,000 price range. And so Apple's coming in with what sounds like a really, really amazing display that comes in at $6,000 to $7,000, depending on how you spec it. And so it'll be interesting to see, in the next several months, because this doesn't even come out till fall. But I guess over the course of the next year in particular, how those particular customers adopt the Mac Pro and the Apple Pro display, and what they do with it. And again, I had a friend ask me, he said, John, would it have made more sense for Apple to announce this at a different event, or maybe an event just for this new product? Because again, your average person out there on the street who sees that Apple announced a, $5,000 display and $6,000 computer, again, doesn't have the context for that, because they just aren't aware of that particular, very minor in terms of number of people, but that high-end super pro that would spend that kind of money on a computer. And again, put it in context. Again, Apple has a range of computers, starting with the Mac Mini that costs just a few $100s. Again, ranging on up to this Mac Pro now that can run a customer up to tens of thousands of dollars. So it's not like Apple's saying to consumers, hey, this is what we want you to buy. This is definitely not who they're targeted at. But would there be any way to minimize that sort of negative publicity of customers who, again, don't have that context? No, I don't know that Apple could. Even if you announce it at NAB, the news is going to get out there somehow. Again, this is for a very select customer, and I'll be curious to see what they think of it. It sounds like the people who are definitely the potential actual customers of this product are very happy with it, so I can't wait to see the kind of things that they do with it and hear some great feedback out of them in a year or so. But that's it. I hope that helps kind of understand the context for the new Mac Pro and kind of where it sits in the market and who it's meant to be sold to, and who Apple's targeting with that. If you have any questions or a comment, what do you think about this? Definitely leave one below. I'd love to hear from you. I love interacting with comments, and we'll have a lot more to talk about in this kind of post WWDC as we have had time to kind of digest all the announcements about iOS 13, iPadOS. Still lots more to talk about. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm your host, John Sherrod, and this is your Apple Update.